Good morning, Deed Grabbers. It's Tuesday. Time for another episode of Goat Talk. Today we're talking about bad Sub2 deals. Can you believe some Sub2 deals actually go bad? If you've got a bad Sub2 deal and you want to talk about it, let us know. We'll get you backstage and get you out here to talk about it. So we'll be back in 29 seconds. Morning, guys. Welcome to Goat Talk. If you're joining us, we'd love to have you say good morning. Let us know where you are, who you are, and all that. If you've got a Sub2 deal or any deal really that you want to talk about that didn't go as planned, we would love to bring you on and talk about that just a little bit. Morning, Kevin. Good to see you. Bad deals. It's really interesting when I put a couple of posts out there, one in our Sub2 Max group, and then just one on my Facebook wall. And I said, hey, if you guys had a bad Sub2 deal, let us know about it. We tend to not want to talk about things that go bad, things that go wrong. Living in, I guess, fake book as we do most of the time, where everybody plays their highlight reels from their life. Lives that obviously have no problems or anything that happens that they don't like. Nobody likes to share that. And it's really unfortunate because as real estate investors, especially as experienced investors, we know things go wrong. Things don't always work out as we would like for them to. And those are important lessons, especially for new people. Hey, Roland, good to see you. From south of New Jersey. Hey, good to have you this morning. But things happen. Things don't always go as planned. I actually made a post on my wall yesterday about the best deal that you may ever do will be the one you don't do because of things that can go wrong. And as newbies, a lot of times, and I don't know how many of you guys are new to investing. If you've been doing this for any period of time, you know about things that go wrong. I can tell from the comments, yeah, you aren't lying. Ain't that the truth? We tend to want to accentuate the positives in a deal. And if I think the examples that I gave yesterday were, for example, if you believe a deal comps out at 300 to 340, a newbie will always go for the 340. After repaired, this thing's going to be worth the max. And while that may happen, you may get offers over and above what you're asking for the house. It's really market dependent. Right now, we aren't seeing that as much. We just sold a rehab where we actually got a full price offer on the house, but we were offering some incentives. We actually offered this rehab we just sold. We offered a $10,000 incentive for our buyer for their closing costs and other things. So that was something that not a lot of just regular sellers are doing. So the house went very quickly. Well, hey, coming out of Little Rock, Arkansas, part of Arcaria, you got Facebook user there. If you guys are going to have to go to, I believe it's StreamYard.com/Facebook. And and that will let us see who you are. We'll know who we're talking to. Otherwise, you're going to have to tell us. So we'd love to have you do that this morning. So we're talking about bad Sub2 deals. So guys, let me ask you this while you're here. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, we'd like to have you do that. You can go to sub2tv.com, depending on where you are, or if you're just on YouTube, you can just hit the subscribe button and the notification bell, and then you'll know when we release new videos. Also, don't let me forget to mention, Jody and I are heading out in the morning to Rubicon. If you guys aren't familiar with Rubicon, that is the real estate Wealth Builders Conference that my friend Dustin Heiner's putting on. Going to have about 40 real estate trainers there. It's a great event. No selling at all, just learning. 3 days. Great. You can use the Sub2 Deals code to get 50% off of that. So if you guys, I know we've got a few people coming. We're going to have a meetup out there, a Sub2 meetup, and looking forward to going and having a great time. So again, I'll remind you guys, if you guys want to jump in here, if you've got a Sub2 deal, a bad one that you want to talk about, we'd love to have you on to talk about that. I'm going to tell you about my worst Sub2 deal. Now, first, let's say, what's the definition of a bad deal? That could be a lot of things. A bad deal could be something where you lost money. It could be something that was just, as my grandmother used to say, too much sugar for a dime. If you guys are familiar with that phrase, I bet if Cindy's on here, she's familiar with that. Just too much trouble. You may have made money, but it was just a lot of trouble. Let's see. Juan says, good morning, William. Can you turn on comments on the YouTube channel? Our producer can take a look at that, I guess, if we don't have comments on the YouTube channel. Looks like Matt Smith said good morning over there. So I'm not sure why it's not working, but good to have you on, Juan. Missed you on the last couple of calls. So let's see. Let's get back to, they're on now. Okay, great. Let's talk about my bad deal. My worst Sub2 deal actually happened to me probably my first year as an investor. And, you know, when you look at the numbers, just purely from a numbers perspective, it really wasn't that bad to begin with. I'll give you guys some background here. I had a guy, his name was Charles. I still remember him very well. Nice guy, called me up and said, hey, I've got a house I need to sell. And he told me his story. And you guys remember, I always say the story's where the deal's at. Charles was a police officer who lived in the southwest part of town. This was in Macon, Georgia. And he had lived in that house, raised his kids there, and bought another house some years later. I can't remember how long he lived in the house, but 10 or 15 years. He'd had it for a while. Bought another house after his kids were grown and out of the house. And his plan as a police officer, you know, his income wasn't that great, really underpaid. So he thought that he would keep that house and turn it into a rental. Well, of course, everyone in the neighborhood knew that Charles was a police officer. So as soon as he moved out, things started happening to the house. You know, he'd go over there, it had been broken into, window busted out, you know, just a lot as time went on. And this had been going on for about a year, and he was always going to get over there and fix it up. That was his intent. Well, the straw that broke the camel's back was when they broke in, pooped in the living room and wrote all over the living room walls with it. You know, all kinds of things I can't even repeat here. But in addition to just trashing the place. So that was really it for him. And he said, you know, I really got to get rid of this house. Well, I was still in my first year of being an investor, and it was too early for me to really see the signs. If that kind of activity is really going on in the neighborhood that you're looking at a house, now I know this now, and you need to know this too, it's probably not an area where you want to own a home. Because I'll tell you this, most people don't want to live in a bad neighborhood. They just don't want to. And so it doesn't matter how good the deal is, it's going to be a lot of trouble. Well, we got the numbers from Charles. He owed about $30,000 on the house. And at the time he had a decent loan on it, it was about 7%. We figured that the house was probably worth $80,000. Now, remember, this was over 20 years ago. The house was probably worth about $80,000 in good condition, and it only needed about $20,000 to fix it up. And that was carpet, paint, new appliances, new countertops. Again, this was 20 years ago. So we figured if we spent we took over the payments on a $30,000 loan. We spent $20,000 on this house to fix it up, and then it was worth about $80,000. Well, that was probably an okay deal. Now, my plan, I wasn't going to leave $20,000 in this house. My plan at the time was to do something that, you know, this was back before there were crazy terms for everything. We didn't know what burr was back then, but my plan was to fix it up, go back to the small local bank that I was doing business with, and refinance that loan out to get my cash back out of it. So that's what we did. We fixed the house up. We went to the small local bank. We refinanced that house. We carried it subject to until we got that fix up done. We pulled our money back out, and then we sold the house. We sold the house on a lease option. It was nice and new. I wish I had some pictures of the house before. I don't. I'll show you guys a picture of it now in a few minutes. But we fixed it up, refinanced the house, pulled our money back out, got a loan with a small local bank, sold it on a lease option. The folks stayed there for a year and a half. They moved out. We sold it on another lease option. Those people stayed for a year or so and moved out. And I want you to know, all along, we got a down payment from these people. It wasn't very much, probably $5,000 or so. They lived in the house that was brand new paint, new carpet, the whole bit. When they moved out, we would have to go back, do some fix up. I'm going to tell you, if you're following people that tell you lease option buyers take care of the house as their own, they're great tenants, they do all this stuff, that's just not true. No one takes care of a home that they're renting. I mean, there are tenants, there are good tenants, there are bad tenants. Some people take decent care of their house. But having that as an expectation, just because they give you some money down, is false. Your chances aren't much better that they're going to take good care of your house just because they're on a lease and option. So I learned a lot of lessons with this particular house. Secondly, I also learned that, people think a cashier's check is as good as cash, but it's really not. You can stop payment on a cashier's check. One of the people that one of my lease option supposedly going to be tenants for this house during the time I had it gave me a cashier's check to hold the house, and before I could get it to the bank, they'd stopped payment on it and changed their mind. So a lot of lessons here in this. Location really matters. When we went to refinance this house, I used an appraiser that I had used a couple of times on other things. And the first thing he said to me was, "Why did you buy a house here?" Real estate is cases. And a lot of times what you'll find is there is actually a street in a town or location that'll be the dividing line between where you want to buy a house and where you don't want to buy a house, okay? And I had bought on the wrong side because I just wasn't aware, okay? So that's something that you really need to think about. So I had bought a house in a bad neighborhood, and people in general don't want to live in bad neighborhoods unless they can't afford anything any better or they are part of the problem. So lots of lessons here in this particular deal. So ultimately what happened with this house is between lease option tenants, somebody broke into the house and did a lot of damage to it, a lot. And at the time I had a lot of stuff going on. I was buying 3 to 5 houses a month. I was doing other rehabs. I already had learned the lesson. This was a few years later. We'd been holding this house, going through a lot of stuff. So I had learned the lesson by then. Don't buy anything on that side of the street. It was so bad that from one break-in and damage to the next break-in and damage, I told my handyman, I said, go over there and just board that house up so they can't get back in it. And that's what we did. And that house stayed boarded up for probably 3 years with me making the mortgage payment on it. Now, remember, at this time, it was my mortgage payment. I had refinanced this house. But I bought this house subject to, and I bought it because somebody called me and they had a house they were going to give me. I didn't evaluate it very well. I was new and I didn't learn. I had not at that point learned all of the lessons that I needed to know. Bad neighborhoods are important. And I don't care how cheap you can get something. You better flip that thing to somebody who enjoys bad neighborhoods. And there are people out there. I mean, we had an investor when I lived in Macon that was his specialty. We used to give him a lot of grief and joke with him that he owned houses that had dirt floors, some of them that were so bad. But there are slumlord people that's all they do is specialize in that, and they really focus on the return that they get. But that was probably, no, absolutely, that was the worst house that I've ever bought, period. I mean, it was just one headache after another. But it was a sub 2. We bird that thing before there was a bird term, and that's how it worked out for us. So I hope none of you guys had as bad a deal as that go on. But chances are, if you're in this business long enough, you're going to have something that doesn't go the way you want. If you guys have any questions or you want to talk about your bad deal, we'd love to have you on. I think, or any other questions about creative real estate. So I think we've got a question here. Drew, I think, has a question. Do you think banks will look to offload low interest rate loans and execute the due on sale more moving forward? That's been brought up a lot since interest rates climbed to what, 8.5%. I think that rates are falling a little bit now. I think you really, Drew, have to think about what all is involved in calling a loan due. And there are a couple of different things. First of all, it's more than just calling a loan due and then somebody immediately pays you off. A lot of people won't be in a position to do that. So if the bank is taking back a large number of houses strictly due to the due on sale clause being an issue, I just don't think that's going to be a healthy thing for the bank. Let's just say, for example, that most people can't refinance or can't pay it off, and the bank has to foreclose on all these houses. Well, there's a lot of cost involved in that. There are attorney's fees that obviously the people aren't going to be paying, so the bank will have to pay. Then there's the liability of just holding that house. If there's all of a sudden a big increase in foreclosures because banks are having to call loans due, and they're sitting on a lot of inventory, what happens when there's a lot of inventory and houses for sale? Well, the prices drop. So I don't think that that's really something that we're going to see happening. I think in most cases you have some options if the bank does call the loan due, either some kind of formal assumption. I think they're going to be open to working with people. I think, and this is based on 25 years of experience, that if you handle two things properly, you're not going to have a due on sale issue. The bank doesn't care. I don't think they have people out there looking for deed transfers. I mean, I may be wrong. I don't know, but there's some effort that would go into that too. I think banks make loans and they want to get paid, and it's just not going to be a problem for you. So if you handle insurance properly, if you make the payments on time, I don't think the bank is going to care what you do. There are a lot of people out there. I'm telling you, there are a lot of things going on in the marketplace right now, I think, that can create some problems. The biggest issue right now that I see is the assignment of a sub-2 purchase. You've got a wholesaler that wholesalers flooded into the creative space, a year or two ago when the market changed and wholesale deals were harder to come by. And you know about half of what you need to know. So you go out there, you use a bunch of crappy contracts, and you try to get some stuff locked up. In a lot of cases, these guys don't even have a power of attorney, but they piece together a sub-2 deal, close with the seller, and then they try to assign that to somebody else for $10,000 or $20,000 or $50,000. And other new investors buy that deal, they pay that money, and they don't fulfill their promises. And there's problems, and the seller doesn't know the new buyer. They don't know who's in control of the house. They made a deal with the wholesaler. So I think there are going to be a lot of those deals that are going bad, a lot of new people that don't know what they need to know to handle those things properly. That could create a problem. I'm more worried about legislation that stops sub-2 than I am about banks calling loans due. So, but anyway, to answer your question, I don't think the banks are just going to start calling loans due. No, I don't think so. Let's see. Matt said, I talk to people all the time who invest in the ghetto here in Vegas. They air tag everything. Vices and vanities. I think you have to ask yourself, is that the kind of life that you want to have? I invest and got started in investing because I didn't want to work that hard. You know, uh, people talk to me, if I ever have a conversation with somebody that invests in low end areas, or even in some people I know that invest in mobile homes, at which, and they all go back to the returns. The returns are incredible. I get it. You spend $5,000, you collect, 500 a month or whatever. The returns are great, but there's something that I call the hassle factor. Okay. Uh, I want to buy a house in a nice area, a nice home. And that's why our model today is much different. We don't even do lease option sales anymore. If I've got somebody giving me 3 to 5% down, uh, then I can sell it with seller financing for 10% or more down. My chances of getting someone into that house that will stay and will pay and will not be a problem are much improved with a larger down payment. It's just a fact. Lease option people, in my experience, and we did lease options for, gosh, 10 or 15 years. My experience with people with lease options is that most of them, 80% in my experience, fail to exercise their option and they give the house back. And that house is coming back with something that experienced investors know as deferred maintenance. And if you don't know that term, you need to look it up, because what it means is they didn't fix stuff, okay? Because it's not their house. And that's the fallback for people who aren't going to follow through. It doesn't matter what's in your contract. Your contract can say that your tenant buyer, there's that term, tenant buyer, is responsible for repairs and maintenance. But the truth is, you better go to whatever your statute is for your state, and they are considered tenants in court. And the judge, you stand a really good chance of, if you find yourself in court, of the judge saying, listen, you own that house, you need to fix it. I've had it go both ways. I've been in court with lease option tenants before, and I've had judges that said, well, you agreed to fix it, so you should have fixed it. And then I've had judges say, you own that house, it's your responsibility to fix it, which ultimately is the truth. So it's going to fall back on you anyway when you get that house back and nothing's been repaired. When there's stains in that new carpet you put in, when the water, they haven't had hot water because the water heater went out and either they couldn't afford to replace it or they just decided not to, or whatever the case is. So you better be prepared to take care of it. It happens. We've had somebody jump in here. I don't know, Andrew, let me know if you wanted to talk about a bad Sub2 or if you're just in here visiting with us. So one of the Facebook users says, my wobbly boxes. Hey, okay. Man, you can have them. I know you guys make a really good return with them and everything. It's just not for me. So any other questions this morning? We're talking about bad deals, Sub2 in particular. I guess the important thing to remember is, and I say this because I see this all the time, people taking on bad deals just because it's a Sub2. Just because somebody will give you a house doesn't mean you need to take it. I've actually seen posts, more than one recently, where there's no cash flow, there is zero equity, and the person trying to sell the house in this Facebook group says the play here is appreciation. I'm telling you guys, the play is never appreciation, because appreciation is just not guaranteed. The market could crash. Something could happen. If you're not making money, if you got to feed that alligator, it's a problem, and you don't ever want to find yourself in that position. So anyway, Roy asked, what did you ever do with that house? That house stayed boarded up until I got a divorce, and during the divorce, everything that we had was liquidated. So the receiver that was involved in the divorce actually sold that house. So I didn't touch it again, but for, I don't know, probably 5 or 6 years, We used it as a lease option until that situation happened. We boarded it up. We didn't mess around with it anymore. Let's see. Any way to protect yourself if the owner financed buyer doesn't pay you? Well, I'll tell you, Roland, with an owner finance property or a lease option, your protection is you'll get your house back. Now, with a lease option, if somebody doesn't pay you in most states, that's going to be a simple eviction. And even with a seller finance, we sell seller finance houses with a land contract, which doesn't convey legal title. And in a lot of states that are land contract friendly, you can evict if they don't pay. But I'll tell you this: the best course of action is always to try to work it out with the person that can't pay. And I'm telling you, going way back, the first thing that you do is you contact them. If you're local, you knock on their door, you give them a call, you show up and you go, "Hey, Bob, we didn't get your payment this month. You've always been very prompt. What's happening?" And you find out what's going on. And then you try to work out a solution. We've been here for about a year and a half now. And the first seller finance deal that we did here, we just got that house back. Actually, and this guy here, he lost his job, and we actually worked it out. It was a good situation. They had taken good care of the house. They'd been in the house for, I don't know, a little over a year. It was one of the first houses we bought, and we worked it out where they made a partial payment their last month, and they left and they cleaned the house out and they left it in really good shape. You're always better off to try to work it out with the person in the house, and if that means cash for keys, then that's what you do. And if you have to pay them to leave, it's a whole lot better than paying a lawyer and not knowing what the outcome's going to be. And especially the way things have been with COVID the last couple of years and all, where somebody can dig in and stay in your house for months and months without paying, the best thing to do is try to work it out in a friendly situation with your seller. And my model for the last 10 years has been, if I have to, I'll just write them a check to leave the house in broom clean condition and go. And as a result, I haven't found myself in court for the last 10 years or so, because, I think there's a line in, what was that Michael Douglas movie, War of the Roses, where Michael Douglas's attorney is Danny DeVito, and he says, "My advice to you is to give to the point of night sweats." So, it's a pride thing. It's an ego thing. If somebody's not paying you, they're in your house. You don't want them living there for free. But really, when you think about it, the best thing to do is just to try to work it out. And if you have to pay them, to get them out, because when you look at the cost of a foreclosure, if you're in a state that's going to require you to foreclose that land contract, or you look at somebody that's paying you $1,500 a month, and if it gets nasty and they keep you in court or they file bankruptcy and they really delay that thing and your underlying payment's $1,000 a month, and they get to stay 6 months because of delay tactics, it's going to wind up costing you $6,000 anyway. And you run the chance of getting a house that's been trashed and you got to do a lot of work to it. Or you can just approach them and go, "Look, I know things are tough and the house looks like it's in great condition. Can you be out of here at the end of the month? I'll write you a check for $2,000 or $3,000. You're ahead." So it's tough, but that's the best way to go. Okay. All right. Let's see what other questions we've got. What's next? There are many of the appreciation deal makers around, and the wholesaler wants 20,000. That's right. I want to make money. I had this conversation with a student in Sub2 Max this past week, and a wholesaler was trying to sell them a deal where they would actually be paying, if I remember correctly, it was 20 or 25,000 over what the market value of the house was. If I remember right, the acquisition cost on this house was going to be $45,000. Some of this stuff's nuts. And I say, we look for 3 profit centers on our deals. We want to buy a house and make money with cash up front. We want cash every month. And of course, we want a back end on that thing. And I may give up one of the 3, but if I give up one of the 3, the other 2 are just going to be, just slam it. So I'm going to get, if I give up cash on the front, then I'm going to get a great cash flow and a super back end payday. And if I give up the back end, of course, the upfront money and the cash flow is going to be good. So I say you go for all three, minimum of two, and they better be good. And I'll tell you, this deal had nothing. I mean, the wholesaler, their fee for this thing was, I think, $40,000. And when we looked at all the numbers, there was no cash flow, very little to none on cash flow, and not that much of a back end. So my student was looking at a potential $18,000 profit if the buyer refinanced in 4 years, and the wholesaler had gotten 40 grand up front and walked away. And I said, man, you got to babysit this thing 4 years to make half of what he made? I don't think so. I don't think that would work for me. So anyway, let's see what else we've got. Questions. Arnie, if I acquire a property on a lease option, should I file a memorandum at the courthouse? How do I protect myself to ensure the seller doesn't sell the property? Arnie, I've done a total of 3 sandwich lease options in my life. And again, this was when I was new, and I was just like most new people. Something looked good, and I'd say, hey, I'm going to do that. And then I would see another, I'd go to another conference, or at the time we didn't have Facebook and YouTube. So we weren't watching videos about how to do stuff. We actually had to get in these chat groups like AOL and stuff like that. Old days. I don't know if you remember that, but anyway. So somebody said something, well, you buy this house on lease option, you don't own it, you control it. That's the way to go. And so I did 3 of those things. So, I bought it on a lease option, and I'll tell you, you don't want a memorandum. The safest way, and you can do that, and it'll work. But this is what we did, and my teacher taught me this, and it was a great thing. We actually had our seller sign a mortgage or deed of trust, whatever state you're in, mortgage, deed of trust, an encumbrance on the property for the amount of our expected profit. Okay, so how does that work? Well, let's say, Arnie, that you buy a house from Bob on lease and option, and you have a strike price to him of $150,000, and you figure you can sell this house on a lease and option for $200,000. Okay, so your expected profit on that deal is $50,000. Okay, so we would have Bob sign the equivalent of a second mortgage to us in the amount of $50,000 and record that at the courthouse. Now, we call that a performance mortgage because it doesn't have any payments or anything else. It just sits there until a certain time in the future. And we did that to keep Bob from going out and further encumbering the property, from selling it out from under us without having to pay us. Any liens or judgments filed would be behind our encumbrance, so we knew we would get our money. So that's the way you want to go, Arnie. You want a performance mortgage, and you want to file that, and you'll have your seller sign that with the lease and option and everything else that you guys do. Okay, so I hope that helps. Okay, let's see. $6,000 to evict in New Jersey, cash or keys, easier for sure. You bet. I'll tell you, Roland, in some of these states, they're not very pro landlord, and I'll tell you, we won't even buy there. We just, I bought across the country. Gosh, let's say we stopped doing that a couple of years ago, but for 10, 12 years, we bought a lot of places. We didn't buy on the West Coast. We didn't buy on the East Coast. And there are certain states in between because the laws are just too anti-landlord. So yeah, there are certain states that are better than others. Okay. Let's see. James William, what training of yours do you recommend if you want to hit the ground running fast? I'm also looking for a quick way for me to buy a primary residence by the fall using Sub2. James, if you want to learn, if you don't have the basics of Sub2 and know what you need to be doing, the Ultimate Sub2 Guidebook, that's what you want. It'll step you through how to do Sub2s. That's really all that you need to get going. If you're more of I want to meet with people, I got a lot of questions, I want to ask a lot of those questions, you can do the Kickstart. which is the ultimate Sub2 and membership in our $7 coaching group, which is $7 a month. And I answer all the questions in there every week. We do a Facebook live call every week where I answer all the questions. We do an actual coaching call once a month. You can check that out. It's a really low point of entry there. $7 a month and the ultimate Sub2. That's the way I'd get started. And I'm going to tell you, the market we're in right now, you want to buy something by the fall, you shouldn't have any trouble doing that. So, okay. What else have we got here? Questions. Do you plan on making these? You're doing a talk to text, aren't you, Matt? Making the Sub2 guidebook a video course at some point, or even an audiobook? Yes, Matt, I am. That was one of the reasons that we wanted to get a studio set up, a permanent one. But man, we're just too busy doing real estate right now to do much of that. We are going to start working on it at some point, though. But man, I'll tell you, we've helped thousands of investors with the physical course. We can help you too. Andrew had a comment. Bingo, deed of trust for the lease option, cloud title. Yeah, it's just so much. A memorandum is okay. You can file a memorandum where you attest that this contract's taken place or whatever's going on. But I'm telling you, a mortgage actually on there, I mean, there ain't no getting around that. The title company can look at a memorandum and then they make a decision on whether they want to go around that, insure over it, ignore it. They make those choices. That's not happening with a mortgage. That's got to be dealt with for sure. So. All right. Okay. Arnie, thanks so much. Yeah, I appreciate that, man. $7 a month. Can't find a better deal. Nope. If you find somebody that'll teach you creative finance for less than $7 a month, I want to know, because I want to be in that group too. Because I'm still learning, man. I learn stuff every single day. Every single day. Man, people teach me lessons all the time. If you guys want something also that'll help you evaluate your deals, I'm going to try to sell you something this morning. We've got a little software product. It's a deal evaluator and profit evaluator. And you can plug in your numbers on any Sub2 deal, or any deal for that matter, but plug in your Sub2 stuff on there and it'll show you whether it's a good deal for a flip, a rental, a seller finance, lease option. It'll highlight that stuff green and red and say yes or no. Is this something that you want to do? Now, it will not give you any information on location, and that's important. We talked about that this morning. Nobody wants to live in the bad part of town, so stay away. My advice: stay away from that stuff. But anyway, you guys can go take a look at that. At sub2deals.com/ or you can just go to Sub2 University and the courses, and you'll see it in there, the profit evaluator. All right, we got any other questions? Matt said he just got the evaluator. Hey, tell me about it. Did you like it? Did it work for you? Hope you did. So anyway, all right, guys, if we got any other questions, we'll take those. And if not, we're going to get out of here. We're working on a new rehab. Don't give me any trouble about that. I keep saying I'm not going to do anymore, but we're working on one. So we're meeting a garage door guy this morning. I'm going to get that done. And then we're getting ready to head to Rubicon. I hope some of you guys can join us there. I know we've got a few students that are going to join us over there. It's in St. Louis. It's at the Union Station in St. Louis. It's kind of fancy, but we're going to have a great time over there. Yep. All right. Well, we're going to get out of here. It was great to have you guys on. Y'all get out there, talk to some sellers. Remember, location's important, okay? Location is super important, and you want to factor that in. It's not just the money. It's also the house. So, okay, we got another question. Can you refer me to anyone who deals with mortgage notes? You want to talk to Christopher 70. And well, I'll see if we can put something in the show notes about Chris. Chris is he's actually in the $7 coaching group. He's on Facebook, Christopher 70, Seveney, I believe. He's great. He's been on our podcast. He's actually been here on Goat Talk talking about how to value a note, how to create notes that that will sell if you want to sell them on the open market. But he's a great guy. He's a great guy. So, all right. All right, guys, we're out of here. Y'all have a great week. Talk to some sellers, buy some houses, and we'll see you next week.